Welcome to Dreaming Minds. Tonight, this is not a lesson and not a race. There is nowhere you need to arrive, and nothing you need to remember. This story is meant to move slowly, like breath in a quiet room, guiding the mind away from urgency and toward distance. When the world grows still, the imagination often drifts outward, beyond walls and streets, beyond the familiar pull of gravity, toward places where time behaves differently. That is where this journey begins. Long before humanity tried to see the edge of the universe, it tried to reach the edge of its own home. The solar system feels vast, yet it is only a small island inside a much larger ocean. For centuries, the sun defined the limits of our understanding, its light marking what felt like the boundary between belonging and the unknown. But curiosity does not respect comfort. It leans outward, even when there is no guarantee of return. In 1977, NASA launched 2 spacecraft with a simple design and an uncertain future. They were called Voyager 1 and Voyager 2. They were not built for elegance, speed, or beauty. They were built to endure. Their mission was not to find an edge, but to pass the outer planets and continue as long as their systems allowed. No one expected them to become travelers beyond the sun's influence. As the Voyagers moved away from Earth, familiar reference points began to fall behind. First, the inner planets faded into insignificance. Then Jupiter and Saturn passed beneath their instruments, enormous and turbulent, briefly dominating the view before shrinking into distant memory. With each passing year, sunlight weakened. Radio signals grew quieter. The solar system loosened its grip. The Voyagers carried no sense of destination. They did not know where they were going. They simply followed trajectories calculated decades earlier, guided by physics rather than intention. Inside each spacecraft, power slowly declined, generated by radioactive material that decayed predictably and without mercy. Every watt mattered. Every decision to keep a system alive meant another had to be silenced. Beyond the orbit of Neptune, the environment changed in ways that could not be seen. The solar wind, a stream of charged particles flowing outward from the sun, grew thinner. Magnetic fields weakened and became less orderly. The space surrounding the spacecraft no longer felt like a continuation of home, but like something older, quieter, and less forgiving. This was the beginning of a transition, not marked by a line, but by absence. There is no dramatic gate at the edge of the solar system, no sudden darkness, no visual signal that announces departure. Instead, the sun's influence fades gradually, like warmth, dissipating as you step farther from a fire. This invisible region, known as the heliosphere, defines where the sun still speaks louder than the galaxy beyond. For decades, the Voyagers drifted toward its outer limit. What made this journey remarkable was not speed or discovery, but patience. The Voyagers moved slowly, carrying human intention farther than any object before them. They became quiet extensions of Earth, continuing forward without awareness, without fear, without expectation. They were not searching for meaning. They were simply moving, and in doing so, they carried the first fragile hint that the solar system, like all things, has an edge that can be crossed. As this story unfolds, remember that this is only the first kind of edge, an edge of distance, an edge of influence, an edge defined not by sight, but by fading force. And beyond it, the journey continues, slower still, deeper into silence, where the sun becomes a memory and the galaxy begins to whisper in its place. The Voyagers continued forward, without ceremony, their motion so steady that it almost feels timeless. From Earth, years passed. On board the spacecraft, there was no sense of passing days or nights, only systems cycling quietly, maintaining orientation, conserving energy, and waiting for instructions that would take many hours to arrive. Distance stretched the relationship between Earth and the probes into something delicate, where every command had to be considered with care. NASA engineers understood early on that these machines would not last forever. The power source that sustained Voyager 1 and Voyager 2 was reliable, but finite. With every passing year, a little less energy remained available. That meant choices. Instruments that had once collected valuable data were slowly powered down, not because they failed, but because survival demanded restraint. What remained active were the systems that could still speak for the spacecraft when almost everything else had gone quiet. As the probes drifted farther from the sun, communication itself became an exercise in patience. Signals weakened as they spread across immense distances, thinning into faint whispers by the time they reached Earth. A message sent from NASA would travel for more than 20 hours before arriving. The response would take just as long to return. Conversation became slow, stretched across days, turning real-time control into careful prediction. During this phase of the journey, the Voyagers approached a boundary that had been theorized for decades, but never directly measured. This boundary did not exist as a wall or a barrier. It was defined instead by balance. On one side, the solar wind pushed outward, shaped by the sun's magnetic field. On the other, the interstellar medium pressed inward, carrying particles and fields from distant stars and ancient explosions. Where these two influences met, the sun's dominance finally weakened. Scientists called this boundary the heliopause. It was not fixed in place. It expanded and contracted with the sun's activity, breathing slowly over years and decades. Crossing it would not feel like arrival. There would be no moment of sudden change. Only subtle shifts in particle density, magnetic orientation, and radiation levels would reveal that something fundamental had changed. For Voyager 1, this moment came quietly. Data, returning to Earth, showed that the spacecraft was detecting far fewer particles from the Sun and far more from the galaxy beyond. Cosmic rays increased, solar influence faded. Without fanfare, the probe had entered interstellar space. Humanity had reached beyond the protective bubble that had surrounded it since the Sun first ignited. When Voyager 2 followed years later, it confirmed what Voyager 1 had suggested. The heliopause was not smooth. It was irregular, complex, and layered. Magnetic fields twisted in unexpected ways. The transition between solar space and interstellar space was not a clean handover, but a tangled exchange. Even here, far from planets and stars, nature refused simplicity. The Voyagers revealed that the edge of the solar system is not a sharp ending. It is a region of uncertainty, a place where influence fades rather than stops. This discovery reshaped how scientists thought about boundaries in space. Edges were no longer lines to be crossed, but zones to be understood. Despite their distance, the Voyagers remained connected to Earth. Their antennas stayed aligned, their slow rotation keeping the fragile link intact. Each successful transmission felt less like control and more like trust. These machines, built with technology from another era, continued to respond with quiet reliability. Yet even as they moved forward, the inevitability of silence loomed. Power would continue to decline. More instruments would be turned off. Eventually, communication would cease altogether. There would be no final message, no signal to mark the end. The Voyagers would simply continue, carrying momentum and memory into the galaxy. In this slow progression, something profound emerged. Exploration did not always require arrival. It did not always reward with images or discoveries that could be easily shared. Sometimes, exploration meant accepting distance, delay, and silence. The Voyagers taught that reaching the edge of home was not about conquest, but about listening carefully as familiar influence faded and something older began to speak. As the Voyagers moved farther beyond the heliopause, their surroundings became increasingly subtle. There were no landmarks to pass, no orbits to cross, no familiar structures to provide orientation. Space here did not announce itself. It revealed itself slowly, through small variations in data that required patience to interpret. Interstellar space was not empty. It was simply quiet in a way the solar system never was. From Earth, scientists at NASA began to understand that the voyagers were now measuring something entirely different from what they had known before. The particles surrounding the spacecraft were no longer shaped primarily by the sun. Instead, they belonged to the galaxy itself, ancient material drifting between stars. These particles carried stories that predated the solar system, remnants of distant supernovae and long-dead suns. The voyagers were listening to a history far older than Earth. One of the most surprising discoveries came from the behavior of magnetic fields. Before the crossing, scientists expected a clear change in magnetic direction once the probes entered interstellar space. Models suggested that the sun's magnetic field and the galaxy's magnetic field would differ sharply. Yet when the data arrived, the change was not as dramatic as anticipated. The magnetic orientation remained strangely familiar, forcing scientists to rethink how boundaries in space actually behave. This unexpected continuity hinted at a more complex interaction between the sun and its galactic environment. Rather than a clean separation, the heliosphere appeared to be intertwined with the surrounding medium. The sun did not exist in isolation. Its influence blended gradually into the larger structure of the Milky Way. Even at the edge of home, connections persisted. Meanwhile, the voyagers themselves aged. Their systems, once abundant with energy, now operated under strict limits. Every command sent from Earth had to be carefully weighed. Turning on one system might require shutting down another forever. There was no room for experimentation. The probes had become fragile elders, still capable, but requiring respect and restraint. Occasionally, anomalies appeared. Data streams became garbled. Numbers arrived that made little sense. Engineers would pause, analyze, and wait, knowing that every action carried consequences delayed by distance. Sometimes the solution was as simple as switching systems back to their intended configuration. Other times, months passed before clarity returned. Each recovery felt less like fixing a machine and more like guiding an aging traveler back onto a steady path. What made these moments remarkable was not their difficulty, but their success. Decades after launch, the Voyagers continued to respond. Their design, once considered basic, proved resilient. Simplicity became endurance. In an environment saturated with radiation and time, fewer moving parts meant fewer opportunities for failure. As the probes drifted onward, their scientific contributions continued quietly. They measured cosmic rays, plasma density, and magnetic fluctuations. These measurements helped scientists understand how our solar system interacts with the galaxy beyond. They revealed that the space between stars is not uniform, but textured, shaped by invisible forces and ancient events. Yet perhaps the most powerful aspect of this phase of the journey was not scientific. It was philosophical. The Voyagers were now so far away that they no longer belonged to Earth in any practical sense. They could not be retrieved. They could not be repaired. They existed beyond intervention, moving forward on trust alone. In this way, the Voyagers transformed from tools into symbols. They represented a willingness to let go, to send something outward, without certainty, without control, without expectation of return. They carried human curiosity into a realm where answers come slowly, if at all. As the distance grew, the solar system became just another star system behind them. The sun, once dominant, faded into insignificance against the vastness of the galaxy. And still, the Voyagers moved on, not searching for a destination, but continuing a quiet conversation with space itself, where boundaries blur, time stretches, and even the idea of home becomes something remembered rather than felt. The farther the Voyagers traveled, the more their journey began to resemble a slow separation rather than an expedition. They were no longer moving away from planets or passing scientific milestones. They were moving away from relevance in the everyday human sense. From this distance, Earth was not just unseen, it was unreachable in any practical way. Commands sent from NASA became suggestions delivered across time, arriving long after the moment that inspired them. This growing delay changed the nature of control. Engineers could no longer react. They had to anticipate. Every decision was based on prediction rather than feedback, trusting that the spacecraft would still be functioning as expected many hours later. It was a careful balance between caution and necessity, between preserving what remained and allowing the probes to continue their quiet work. Inside Voyager 1 and Voyager 2, the environment was unforgiving. Cosmic radiation bombarded their systems continuously, slowly degrading electronics never meant to last this long. Temperature differences strained materials, yet the probes endured, not because they were invincible, but because they were simple. They had been designed in an era when reliability mattered more than flexibility, when redundancy was physical rather than digital. As years turned into decades, scientists began to realize that the Voyagers were doing something no planned mission could ever replicate. They were providing a long, uninterrupted record of space beyond the sun's influence. Most missions last years, sometimes a decade. The Voyagers offered continuity across generations of scientists. Data collected in the 1980s could be compared with data from the 2000s and beyond, revealing slow changes that short missions would never notice. One of the most important insights came from observing how the heliosphere interacts with the galaxy over time. Rather than acting as a rigid shield, the sun's influence appeared dynamic and responsive. Solar cycles caused the boundary to expand and contract. Shock waves from solar activity rippled outward, eventually reaching the interstellar medium. The solar system was not sealed off. It was in constant conversation with the galaxy around it. The Voyagers showed that interstellar space itself is not uniform. Particle density varied. Magnetic structures shifted gradually. Cosmic rays arrived in patterns that suggested distant sources and complex paths. This was not a calm void. It was a vast environment shaped by forces operating on scales far larger than the solar system. As instruments were slowly powered down, each shutdown carried weight. Once an instrument was turned off, it could never be turned back on. These were final decisions. Engineers debated them carefully, knowing that each choice shaped the last scientific chapter of the mission. What should remain active? What knowledge was still worth gathering? What questions could still be answered with the limited power available? Meanwhile, the Voyagers themselves continued to move without awareness of their significance. They did not know they were unique. They did not know they were first. They simply followed the laws of motion, carrying momentum imparted decades earlier. Their silence, when it eventually comes, will not mark failure. It will mark completion. What makes this stage of the journey especially profound is its quiet honesty. There is no triumph here, no dramatic arrival, no declaration of success, only persistence. The Voyagers teach that exploration does not always reward us with spectacle. Sometimes it offers perspective instead. From this distance, the solar system no longer feels central. It becomes one system among billions. The sun becomes one star among many, and Earth, once the origin of all intention, becomes an idea rather than a place. In continuing onward, the Voyagers demonstrate something subtle but powerful, that letting go can be an act of exploration, that sending something beyond our reach does not diminish us. It expands the context in which we understand ourselves. As they drift deeper into the galaxy, the Voyagers are no longer carrying questions for us to answer. They are carrying evidence that curiosity, once released, does not need supervision to endure. As the years continued to pass, the Voyagers slipped into a kind of existence that no mission planners had ever truly imagined. They were no longer operating within the familiar framework of exploration, where goals are defined, milestones are reached, and success is measured by arrival. Instead, Voyager 1 and Voyager 2 entered a phase where endurance itself became the mission. Their value was no longer tied to where they were going, but to the simple fact that they were still there at all. By this point, the probes had become the most distant human-made objects in existence. That distance was not symbolic, It was physical, measurable, and deeply consequential. Signals traveling between Earth and the spacecraft now took nearly an entire day to arrive. Any response required the same amount of time to return. What once felt like communication now resembled correspondence, slow and deliberate, unfolding across long stretches of silence. Within NASA, entire generations of engineers and scientists came and went while the voyages continued. Many of the people who designed the spacecraft had long since retired. Some were no longer alive, yet the machines they built remained active, operating far beyond their expected lifetimes. Knowledge was passed down not through direct experience, but through documentation, archived data, and careful stewardship. The voyages became a shared responsibility across time, linking past intention with present care. As the probes moved farther into interstellar space, their measurements grew increasingly valuable, precisely because they were rare. No other spacecraft had ever sampled this region directly. Every particle detected, every fluctuation in magnetic fields, added to a picture that had previously existed only in theory. These measurements allowed scientists to refine their understanding of how stars interact with the space between them, and how protective bubbles like the heliosphere shape planetary environments. One of the most humbling realizations was how small the sun's domain truly is. For most of human history, the sun felt absolute, its influence defining warmth, light, and life itself. Yet beyond a certain distance, its power fades into insignificance. The voyagers crossed that threshold, not dramatically, but inevitably, revealing that even stars have limits. As power continued to decline, difficult decisions became unavoidable. Instruments that had served faithfully for decades were shut down forever. Each shutdown was irreversible. Engineers weighed scientific value against survival, choosing to preserve systems that could still offer insight into the environment beyond. This careful rationing of energy turned the spacecraft into minimalist observers, focused on only the most essential measurements. At times, unexpected issues arose. A subsystem might behave unpredictably. Telemetry could arrive corrupted or incomplete. In these moments, patience mattered more than urgency. Engineers analyzed patterns, ruled out possibilities, and sent cautious commands, knowing that a single mistake could end the mission entirely. That the voyagers survived these moments at all is a testament to their design and to the restraint of those guiding them from Earth. Beyond the technical challenges, something more subtle began to emerge. The voyagers were no longer merely scientific instruments. They had become markers of perspective. They showed that progress does not always move quickly, and that significance does not require visibility. For years at a time, nothing seemed to change, and yet, with each passing moment, they were farther than ever before. Eventually, the idea of an edge itself began to feel less concrete. The heliosphere had been crossed, but no boundary had truly ended the journey. There was always more space ahead, more distance to cover, more time to endure. The edge of the solar system was not a wall, but a transition into something far larger and far less defined. In this extended quiet, the voyagers offered a different lesson about exploration, that it is not always about discovery in the dramatic sense. Sometimes it is about presence, about continuing to exist in places where existence was never guaranteed, about maintaining a connection, however faint, across distances that challenge imagination. As they drift deeper into the galaxy, Voyager 1 and Voyager 2 carry no awareness of their role in human history. They do not know they are watched. They do not know they are remembered. They simply continue forward, guided by momentum and physics alone. And in that quiet persistence, they redefine what it means to reach an edge, not by stopping, but by continuing long after all familiar reference points have fallen away. As the voyagers pressed farther into interstellar space, their journey began to take on a meaning that extended beyond science or engineering. They were no longer only measuring particles or magnetic fields. They were becoming part of the environment they traveled through, moving so slowly and steadily that their presence blended into the vast rhythm of the galaxy. At these distances, speed loses its drama, motion becomes subtle, almost philosophical, defined not by urgency, but by inevitability. From Earth, NASA teams continued to track the probes with extraordinary care. Every transmission received was examined closely, not just for data, but for reassurance. The strength of the signal, its stability, its consistency over time, all mattered. Each successful exchange confirmed that the spacecraft still understood their orientation, still knew how to speak, still knew where Earth was. This quiet competence became a kind of dialogue, sparse but deeply meaningful. By now, the Voyagers were operating in an environment unlike anything humanity had directly experienced. Interstellar space is shaped by forces that act over immense distances and timescales. Shock waves from ancient stellar explosions pass through it. Magnetic fields stretch and fold across light years. Particles drift for millions of years before encountering anything solid. The probes moved through this environment as temporary visitors, sampling conditions that will remain long after they are gone. One of the most profound realizations from this phase of the mission was how gradual cosmic change truly is. On human timescales, nothing seemed to happen. Days passed with no noticeable difference. Months passed with little variation. Yet over years and decades, patterns emerged. Cosmic ray levels shifted. Plasma densities changed. The galaxy revealed itself not through sudden events, but through slow accumulation. As the Voyagers aged, their vulnerability became more apparent. Components that had functioned flawlessly for decades began to show their limits. Memory systems occasionally faltered. Sensors drifted slightly out of calibration. Each anomaly was handled with patience and respect, acknowledging that these machines had already exceeded every reasonable expectation placed upon them. There was no rush to fix what could not be fixed, only a careful effort to preserve what still worked. At this stage, the mission no longer felt like exploration in the traditional sense. There were no new destinations to announce, no dramatic flybys to anticipate. Instead, the achievement lay in continuity, in maintaining presence beyond the sun's reach, in proving that something created on a small planet could remain functional while traveling through the space between stars. The Voyagers also began to challenge how humans think about ownership and belonging. They no longer belonged to Earth in any physical way. They could not be guided closely, retrieved, or repurposed. They existed beyond jurisdiction, beyond recovery, beyond intervention. And yet, they remained connected through intention, through attention, through the simple act of listening. There was a quiet beauty in this relationship. Earth sent instructions without knowing if they would succeed. The Voyagers responded without knowing who listened. The exchange was stripped of immediacy, leaving only trust and patience. In this way, the mission mirrored something deeply human, the willingness to send words or ideas into the unknown, hoping they will be received. As power continued to diminish, the inevitable end grew closer. Engineers spoke of it, not with sadness, but with acceptance. The probes had already given more than anyone expected. Their eventual silence would not erase what they had revealed. It would simply mark the moment when observation yielded fully to motion. In drifting onward, the Voyagers entered a phase where their significance no longer depended on data. They became enduring traces of curiosity itself, moving steadily through a galaxy that does not notice them, carrying no message except their continued existence. They remind us that reaching an edge is not always about crossing a boundary. Sometimes it is about staying present in a place where nothing is familiar, and continuing forward anyway, guided by nothing more than momentum, physics, and the quiet confidence of having already gone far enough to matter. As the Voyagers continue onward, there comes a point where distance stops being something that can be easily imagined. Numbers lose their meaning. Kilometers and light hours become abstractions, symbols rather than measurements. At this range, separation from Earth is not felt as space, but as time. Long stretches of waiting between cause and effect. question, and response. From this far away, Earth's influence is reduced to a faint and disciplined signal, a narrow beam of radio energy, carefully aimed, carrying instructions formed long before the spacecraft will receive them. By the time those signals arrive, conditions may already have changed. Yet the Voyagers respond, adjusting orientation, reporting status, continuing a conversation that unfolds at a pace slower than human intuition. Inside the probes, processes repeat with quiet regularity. Heaters cycle on and off to protect delicate components from extreme cold. Gyroscopes maintain alignment. Transmitters wait patiently for the next scheduled contact. There is no awareness of purpose, no sense of mission, only adherence to physical laws and programmed behavior. And yet, through this mechanical simplicity, something deeply human persists. The Voyagers are now so distant that their signals are among the weakest ever detected from a human-made object. They arrive at Earth barely distinguishable from background noise. Sophisticated antennas and careful filtering are required to separate their voices from the cosmic static that fills space. Listening to them requires effort, commitment, and trust that the faint whisper is still there. This act of listening has become symbolic. It represents humanity's willingness to pay attention, even when the return is minimal. There are no images anymore, no dramatic discoveries, only incremental confirmation that the spacecraft still exists, still moves, still responds. The reward is not spectacle, but continuity. At this stage, the Voyagers have effectively left the realm of missions and entered the realm of legacy. They are no longer doing what they were built to do. They are doing something far rarer. They are outlasting expectation. They are extending the reach of a moment in history, long after that moment has passed. One day, the power will finally drop below what is needed to transmit. The antennas will fall silent. No signal will announce the transition. The absence will simply be noticed one day when Earth calls and nothing answers. That silence will not mean disappearance. The Voyagers will still be there, moving, unchanged by the loss of attention. Long after their voices fade, they will continue to orbit the center of the Milky Way, just as the Sun does. They will pass near stars, drift through clouds of gas, and remain intact far longer than the civilization that built them. Their golden records, fragile and symbolic, will continue to circle silently, carrying traces of a world that once reached outward. In this final stage of the Voyager story, the idea of an edge becomes something quieter and more reflective. The edge is not where the spacecraft stops, it is where human control ends. Beyond that point, motion continues without supervision, without intention, without awareness. And perhaps that is the most profound lesson the Voyagers offer. That exploration does not always conclude with arrival. Sometimes it concludes with release, with letting something go beyond our reach, trusting that its journey does not require our presence to remain meaningful. As the Voyagers drift deeper into the galaxy, they carry no commands, no expectations, and no need for acknowledgement. Only the enduring evidence that once, from a small and quiet planet, something was sent outward simply to see how far it could go. As the Voyagers drifted beyond the reach of the Sun, another kind of journey was already unfolding much closer to home. Humanity did not only want to know how far it could go, it also wanted to know how far it could see. Distance could be crossed slowly by machines, but vision required a different approach, one that did not leave the solar system at all. Instead, it required leaving Earth behind just enough to look back out with clarity. For centuries, the night sky had been filtered through atmosphere, turbulence, and light. Stars flickered, details blurred. Even the most powerful ground-based telescopes were limited by the restless air that wrapped the planet. The universe was there, but always softened, distorted, never fully revealed. To see farther, humanity needed to rise above its own world. This idea led NASA to place an eye directly into space, not a traveler like the Voyagers, but an observer, an instrument designed not to move outward, but to stare steadily into the dark without interruption. This was the purpose of the Hubble Space Telescope. When Hubble was launched, it did not immediately fulfill its promise. A flaw in its primary mirror blurred its vision, turning sharp points of light into soft halos. For a time, the great eye in space could not see clearly. Yet this setback did not end the mission. It revealed something different, a willingness to repair, to return to correct a mistake, rather than abandon the effort. Astronauts later serviced Hubble, restoring its sight and transforming it into one of the most powerful scientific instruments ever built. Once Hubble's vision was corrected, its impact became profound. Freed from atmospheric interference, it began to observe the universe with unprecedented clarity. Stars resolved into systems, nebulae revealed structure, galaxies separated from one another instead of blending into faint smudges. The sky was no longer a flat backdrop. It was layered, textured, deep. One of Hubble's most important contributions came from looking at what appeared to be empty space. Astronomers pointed the telescope toward a small dark patch of sky, where nothing of interest seemed to exist. They allowed Hubble to observe this region for an extended period, collecting faint light over many days. What emerged was astonishing. The darkness was not empty at all. It was filled with galaxies, thousands of them. Each one a vast system of stars, gas, and dust, many of them so distant that their light had begun its journey billions of years earlier. What looked like nothing from Earth turned out to be crowded beyond imagination. This single observation reshaped humanity's sense of scale. The universe was not sparsely populated with isolated islands of matter. It was dense with structure, extending far beyond what the eye could naturally perceive. The idea of an edge began to shift again, not as a physical boundary, but as a limit imposed by perception itself. Hubble also revealed that looking far away is the same as looking back in time. Because light travels at a finite speed, distant objects appear as they were long ago. Some of the galaxies Hubble observed no longer exist in their original form. They have merged, evolved, or faded, yet their ancient light continues to arrive, carrying preserved moments from a younger universe. In this way, Hubble became a time machine of sorts, not one that moves backward, but one that allows observation across epochs. Each deep image compressed billions of years into a single frame, showing the universe at different stages of its life. Unlike the Voyagers, Hubble never left the neighborhood of Earth. It remained in orbit, circling the planet again and again, and yet its reach extended far beyond anything those distant probes could ever touch. It showed that an edge does not always require distance to be crossed. Sometimes it only requires patience, stillness, and the ability to look into darkness long enough for it to reveal what has always been there. Hubble's deepest impact did not come from a single image, but from a shift in how humanity understood its place in the universe. Once the telescope began sending back clear data, scientists realized that space was not only larger than expected, but richer, older, and more crowded with history than anyone had imagined. Every observation added layers to a story that no longer fit into simple models of beginnings and endings. When astronomers analyzed Hubble's deep field images, they were not just counting galaxies, they were reading timelines. Each faint smudge of light represented billions of stars bound together by gravity, forming structures that had taken immense amounts of time to assemble. Some of these galaxies appeared small and irregular, unlike the elegant spirals seen closer to Earth. This suggested that they were young, still forming, still learning how to exist. Hubble was not only showing where galaxies were, it was showing how they grew. The deeper Hubble looked, the more it revealed about cosmic evolution. Galaxies in the early universe looked different from those nearby. They collided more often, they burned brighter, they formed stars at a furious pace. Over time, these chaotic systems slowed, merged, and settled into the shapes that now feel familiar. Through Hubble's images, scientists could trace this transformation, watching structure emerge from disorder across billions of years. This understanding changed how time itself was perceived. The universe was no longer a static backdrop. It was dynamic, restless, always changing. Even the most distant light carried evidence of motion and growth. Hubble made it clear that the cosmos had a history, one written not in words, but in light stretched thin by expansion. Another revelation came from observing how gravity shapes what we see. Massive objects bend space itself, warping the path of light, passing nearby. Hubble captured these distortions, known as gravitational lensing, where distant galaxies appear stretched, duplicated, or arranged into delicate arcs. These images were not artistic illusions. They were direct evidence that space and time are flexible, shaped by matter on the largest scales. Through these observations, Hubble helped confirm theories that had once felt abstract. It showed that invisible matter influences visible structure. It demonstrated that expansion is ongoing, that galaxies are still moving away from one another, carried by the stretching of space itself. Each dataset reinforced the idea that the universe is not settling towards stillness. It is continuing to unfold. Perhaps most quietly transformative was the realization that there is no privileged direction in space. Hubble looked deep in many directions, and everywhere it found galaxies. No matter where it pointed, the universe extended outward with similar richness. This suggested that Earth, the Sun, and even the Milky Way do not occupy a special center. They exist within a vast uniform expanse, one region among countless others. This shift in perspective carried emotional weight as well as scientific meaning. Humanity had long imagined itself at the center of cosmic stories. Hubble gently removed that illusion, replacing it with something broader and more humbling. We were not central, but we were capable of understanding. We were small yet able to observe structures spanning unimaginable distances and times. Unlike the voyages which moved steadily outward, Hubble remained close to Earth, revisiting the same regions of sky again and again. This persistence allowed it to notice subtle changes, to refine measurements, to deepen understanding through repetition. Its strength was not motion, but attention. Data collected early in its mission continued to be analyzed years later, revealing new insights as techniques improved. Questions that could not be answered at first slowly gave way to clarity. In this sense, Hubble demonstrated that seeing far is not only about distance, but about patience across time. Through Hubble, the edge of vision moved farther than ever before, not because the universe ended there, but because human perception had been extended. The telescope showed that what once felt like darkness was full of structure, history, and motion, and in doing so, it prepared humanity for the next kind of edge. Not just the edge of distance, or the edge of sight, but the edge of time itself, where light from the earliest moments of the universe still waits to be understood. As Hubble continued its long vigil above Earth, its role quietly evolved. It was no longer simply a telescope collecting images. It became a reference point, a standard against which understanding was measured and refined. With every year in orbit, its archive grew deeper, not just in volume but in significance. Observations made decades apart could now be compared, revealing changes so subtle they would otherwise have gone unnoticed. One of Hubble's most important contributions came from its ability to measure distance with precision. By observing specific types of stars whose brightness follows predictable patterns, astronomers were able to calculate how far away certain galaxies truly were. This work helped refine the scale of the universe itself. Distances that were once uncertain by large margins became clearer, reshaping estimates of the universe's age and rate of expansion. Through these measurements, Hubble played a central role in understanding how fast the universe is growing. The expansion of space was no longer a theoretical concept. It became a measurable reality, confirmed through repeated observation. Galaxies were not merely moving through space. Space itself was stretching, carrying them apart in all directions. As this picture sharpened, another mystery emerged. The expansion of the universe was not slowing down. As once expected, it was accelerating. Something unseen was influencing the cosmos on the largest scales, pushing galaxies away from one another faster over time. This unknown influence came to be known as dark energy. Hubble could not see dark energy directly. No telescope can, but through careful measurement of distant supernovae and galaxy distributions, its presence became undeniable. The universe was behaving in a way that visible matter alone could not explain. This realization marked a profound shift. The majority of the universe was not only unseen, it was fundamentally mysterious. In revealing this, Hubble expanded the concept of an edge once again. The limit was no longer just how far we could see, but how much we could explain. The universe had shown that it contained forces and components beyond current understanding. Observation had reached a point where new questions outpaced answers. Despite these revelations, Hubble itself remained fragile. Its orbit slowly decayed. Its systems aged. Periodic servicing missions extended its life, replacing instruments, upgrading capabilities, and correcting wear. Each visit was a reminder that this extraordinary eye in space was still dependent on human care. Its clarity came not only from engineering, but from continued attention and responsibility. As time passed, Hubble's images became woven into human culture. They appeared not just in scientific journals, but in classrooms, books, and quiet moments of reflection. Nebulae glowing softly, galaxies spiraling in distant darkness. These were no longer abstract concepts. They became shared references, shaping how people imagined the universe beyond Earth. Yet for all its beauty, Hubble never claimed finality. Every image hinted at what lay beyond its reach. Light grew fainter, details softened. There were regions of space and epochs of time that even Hubble could not resolve. The edge of vision had moved, but it had not disappeared. In this way, Hubble fulfilled its deeper purpose. It showed not only what could be seen, but what remained hidden. It made the limits of perception visible, and by doing so, it prepared humanity for a new kind of observer. One designed not to see sharper light, but to sense the faint warmth of the earliest stars, waiting beyond the reach of sight, deeper still in time. As the years passed, the Hubble Space Telescope settled into a rhythm that felt almost meditative. It circled Earth again and again, returning to the same paths while its gaze reached farther than any human eye ever had. This contrast became part of its quiet power, motion close to home, vision far beyond it. From its position above the atmosphere, Hubble was able to observe the universe without interruption. There were no clouds to drift across its view, no air to blur distant light. What reached its mirrors arrived clean and undisturbed, carrying information that had traveled for millions or even billions of years. Every photon held a fragment of history, and Hubble became a careful reader of those fragments. One of the telescope's greatest strengths was its ability to return to the same region of space repeatedly. This persistence revealed changes that could never be noticed in a single image. Stars brightened and faded. Explosions appeared where nothing had been before. Galaxies shifted subtly as time passed. The universe, once imagined as fixed and distant, revealed itself as alive with motion, even on timescales far beyond human life. Through long observation, Hubble helped astronomers understand how stars are born and how they die. It captured clouds of gas collapsing under gravity, igniting nuclear fusion deep within their cores. It also observed the aftermath of stellar death, glowing shells of material expanding slowly into space. These cycles showed that creation and destruction are not opposites, but parts of the same process, unfolding continuously across the cosmos. Hubble's view also clarified how galaxies interact. Rather than existing in isolation, galaxies were seen colliding, merging, and reshaping one another over immense periods of time. These encounters triggered waves of star formation and altered galactic structure, What once seemed like calm, distant objects were revealed as dynamic systems, shaped by gravity and chance across cosmic history. Distance, too, took on new meaning through Hubble's observations. Light arriving from the farthest galaxies was stretched by the expansion of space itself, shifting toward redder wavelengths. This redshift became a measure of how far and how long light had traveled. Through careful analysis, astronomers could place galaxies along a timeline, reconstructing the universe's gradual expansion from a denser, hotter past. In doing so, Hubble helped confirm that the universe has been expanding since its earliest moments. Space itself was growing, carrying galaxies apart, not through motion alone, but through the stretching of the fabric they inhabit. This idea reshaped cosmology, replacing static models with a universe defined by change and growth. Yet even as understanding deepened, uncertainty remained. Measurements refined the universe's age and size, but they also revealed tensions, small mismatches between expectation and observation. The cosmos did not align perfectly with prediction. It hinted at missing pieces, unseen influences shaping its behavior on the largest scales. Hubble did not resolve these mysteries, it illuminated them. Throughout its mission, NASA treated Hubble not as a finished instrument, but as a living one. Servicing missions replaced aging components and introduced new technologies, extending its life and expanding its capabilities. Each visit renewed the telescope's ability to observe, demonstrating that exploration is often sustained through care rather than replacement. As Hubble aged, its legacy grew. Its images became familiar, not because they were repeated, but because they resonated. They invited reflection rather than urgency. They showed a universe that is vast without being hostile, complex without being chaotic. They offered scale without demanding insignificance. In the end, Hubble's greatest contribution may not be any single discovery. It may be the way it taught humanity to look patiently, to stare into darkness without assuming emptiness, to accept that seeing farther often means seeing earlier, into times when the universe itself was still learning how to exist, and still there were limits. Light from the very first stars had been stretched beyond what Hubble could detect. The earliest chapters of cosmic history remained hidden, not because they were gone, but because they spoke in wavelengths Hubble could not hear. The edge of sight had been pushed far, but not far enough. Beyond Hubble's reach, another observer was being prepared, one designed to listen where light had faded into warmth, one built to look not just across distance, but back across time itself, toward the quiet beginnings that waited just beyond vision, still untouched, still unseen. To beyond the reach of Hubble's vision, the universe continued to hold its earliest secrets. Light from the first stars had traveled for so long that it no longer appeared as visible brightness. Expansion stretched it, cooled it, shifted it into wavelengths, too gentle for Hubble's instruments to detect. The story of the beginning was still there, but it spoke in a quieter language. To hear that language, a different kind of telescope was needed, not one that chased sharper light, but one that could sense faint warmth. Not an eye designed for brilliance, but one built for patience. This idea shaped the James Webb Space Telescope, a mission conceived to look farther back in time than any instrument before it. Unlike Hubble, James Webb was not placed in orbit around Earth. It was sent far away, to a gravitational balance point where Earth and the Sun pull evenly. There it could remain stable, shielded from heat and light, unfolding its delicate structure in deep space. Its mirrors were coated in gold, not for beauty, but for precision, chosen to reflect infrared light with extraordinary efficiency. James Webb was built to see what Hubble could not. It observes the universe in infrared wavelengths, where the faint glow of ancient stars and galaxies still lingers. This allows it to peer through cosmic dust that blocks visible light, and to detect objects whose light has been stretched across billions of years. In doing so, it does not simply look farther away. It looks earlier. When James Webb began sending back its first images, the effect was immediate and profound. Galaxies appeared in unexpected abundance. Structures formed sooner than models had predicted. The early universe did not seem empty or tentative. It appeared active, complex, already busy with formation and motion. These observations suggested that stars and galaxies assembled more rapidly than previously thought. The universe wasted little time. Within a few 100 million years after its beginning, light had already ignited across vast regions of space. Webb revealed that the earliest galaxies were not fragile beginnings, but robust systems, forming stars at astonishing rates. James Webb also began to study the atmospheres of distant planets, analyzing the faint signatures of molecules as starlight passed through alien skies. This capability expanded the idea of exploration once again. The edge was no longer just about distance or time. It included possibility, the question of what conditions exist elsewhere, and whether familiar processes might arise beyond Earth. Throughout its observations, Webb reinforced a quiet truth. The universe is not simple at its beginnings. It does not emerge slowly into order. It arrives with complexity already in motion. The earliest chapters are not empty pages, but dense passages filled with activity, shaped by forces still not fully understood. Together, Voyager, Hubble, and James Webb form a single continuous story. Voyager shows how far we can go. Hubble shows how far we can see. James Webb shows how far back we can remember. Each reaches an edge, not as an ending, but as a transition into deeper understanding. As this story continues, the edges do not disappear. They shift. They invite quieter questions. And as you rest, imagine these instruments, still at work. Voyager drifting between stars. Hubble watching patiently from above Earth. James Webb listening for warmth from the first light ever formed. All of them extending human awareness outward, not with urgency, but with calm persistence, reminding us that the universe does not demand haste. It reveals itself slowly, to those willing to wait, to look gently, and to listen long enough for even the faintest echoes of the beginning to be heard. The James Webb Space Telescope did not arrive at its destination quickly, and it was never meant to. Its journey unfolded slowly, deliberately, as if matching the patience required to observe the early universe itself. After launch, it traveled far from Earth, unfolding piece by piece, in a sequence that left no room for haste. Each movement mattered. Each step depended on the last. Only when everything was aligned could Webb begin the work it was designed to do. Unlike telescopes before it, James Webb needed deep cold to function. Heat is noise in infrared observation. Even the warmth of the sun, distant as it may seem, could overwhelm the faint signals Webb was meant to capture, so it unfolded a vast shield, layered and precise, blocking light and heat, creating a shadow colder than any natural place near Earth. Within that shadow, its instruments settled into stillness, ready to listen. What Webb listens for is not brightness, but memory. Infrared light carries the imprint of time. As the universe expands, light stretches with it, shifting away from the visible and into longer wavelengths. The farther back in time light originates, the more it is transformed by its journey. Webb was built to receive these transformed signals, to interpret them not as loss, but as information preserved through distance. When Webb began observing the earliest galaxies, it revealed something unexpected. The young universe was not sparse or tentative. It was active, crowded, already rich with structure. Galaxies appeared sooner and more developed than theories had predicted. They were forming stars rapidly, interacting, evolving. The universe did not hesitate at its beginning. It moved forward with urgency, even while operating on timescales far beyond human experience. These findings challenged long-held assumptions. If galaxies formed earlier and faster, then the processes driving their growth must be more efficient than previously believed. Dark matter, gravity, cooling gas, and radiation all played roles that were still not fully understood. Webb did not solve these puzzles, it made them unavoidable. It showed that the early universe was not a simple prelude, but a complex chapter in its own right. Beyond galaxies, Webb began to study the environments surrounding newborn stars. Dense clouds of gas and dust, opaque to visible light, became transparent in infrared. Inside them, stars ignited quietly, hidden from view until now. Webb revealed how planetary systems begin, how disks of material gather, collide, and settle around young stars. It showed that the processes that shaped our own solar system are not unique. They are common, repeating, woven into the fabric of the cosmos. Webb's ability to analyze light also allowed it to study the atmospheres of distant worlds. By examining how starlight filters through these atmospheres, it can detect the presence of molecules, patterns, and chemistry. This does not answer whether life exists elsewhere. It reframes the question. It shifts focus from speculation to conditions, from imagination to evidence. In this way, the edge becomes something different again. Not just distance, not just sight, not just time, but possibility. Webb does not promise answers. It offers context. It shows how common complexity is, how quickly structure arises, how many environments exist where familiar processes unfold. Together, these observations create a quiet continuity. Voyager carries us outward, beyond the sun's reach. Hubble extends our vision across space and time. James Webb reaches back toward the beginning, not to find an end, but to understand how everything began to take shape. None of these instruments stand alone. They form a progression, each one preparing us for the next question, rather than closing the last. As you rest, imagine this layered exploration, continuing without urgency. Machines drifting, watching, listening. Data arriving slowly, patiently, across immense distances. The universe does not rush its story. It unfolds over billions of years, revealing itself in fragments to those willing to observe quietly. And perhaps that is the final edge NASA has reached so far. Not a boundary in space or time, but a way of paying attention, a willingness to wait, to accept that understanding grows slowly, to recognize that the deepest truths are not announced loudly, but emerge gently, over time, when we are calm enough to notice. As James Webb continued its observations, a deeper pattern began to emerge. The universe, at every stage of its history, seemed less fragile than once imagined. From the first galaxies to the formation of stars and planets, structure appeared quickly and persisted through change. This resilience suggested that creation is not rare or delicate, but built into the nature of space itself. Webb's images carried a different emotional weight than those from Hubble. Where Hubble revealed grandeur and scale, Webb revealed intimacy. Details hidden for billions of years came into view, not as distant abstractions, but as textured, layered systems. Dust clouds glowed softly. Young stars appeared wrapped in their birth material. Galaxies showed internal complexity that spoke of motion, tension, and balance. Through these observations, time began to feel less like a straight line and more like a deep landscape. Looking farther away no longer felt like looking outward. It felt like looking downward into earlier layers of existence. Each image became a cross-section through cosmic history, revealing how the present rests upon countless past moments. Webb also began to show how light itself carries memory. Photons released billions of years ago still move through space, unbroken, unchanged in purpose. They are stretched, cooled, softened, but never erased. When Webb captures them, it is not creating an image. It is receiving a message that has been traveling since the universe was young. This realization reshapes how distance is understood. Distance is not separation, it is preservation. The farther light travels, the more history it carries. Webb's role is not to chase light, but to wait for it, to hold still long enough for ancient signals to arrive. As more data accumulated, scientists began to see that the early universe was already organized by invisible frameworks. Dark matter formed scaffolding that guided the flow of gas. Gravity pulled material into patterns that would later become galaxies and clusters. Even chaos followed structure. Even randomness unfolded within boundaries. Webb did not reveal a universe struggling to exist. It revealed a universe confident in its own processes, one that forms stars naturally, one that assembles galaxies efficiently, one that produces complexity as a consequence, not an exception. This understanding softened one of humanity's oldest fears, the fear of insignificance. To be small in a vast universe once felt diminishing. But Webb suggested something else, that smallness and belonging are not opposites. That being part of a large system does not erase meaning, it situates it. In the quiet accumulation of Webb's observations, the concept of an edge dissolves almost entirely. There is no final boundary to cross, no ultimate wall to reach, only layers of understanding, each revealing another beneath it. Edges become moments of transition, rather than endpoints. Voyager crossed the edge of home. Hubble crossed the edge of sight. James Webb crosses the edge of memory. Together they show that exploration is not about conquering space, but about deepening awareness. As this story continues to unfold, the universe remains patient. It does not demand to be understood quickly. It allows questions to remain open. It offers fragments rather than conclusions. And as you rest, imagine that patience extending inward as well, thoughts slowing, attention softening, the mind no longer searching for answers, but simply resting in the presence of scale, time, and quiet continuity. NASA's instruments continue their work without urgency. Voyager drifts, Hubble watches, James Webb listens, each in its own way, reminding us that the deepest journeys are not rushed, and that the edge is not something we arrive at, but something we learn to notice gently over time. As the work of James Webb continues, something subtle happens to the way the universe is perceived. It no longer feels distant in the way it once did. The immense scales remain. The billions of years do not shrink, yet there is a growing sense of continuity between then and now. The early universe is no longer a separate era locked away behind theory. It becomes part of the same unfolding story, connected to the present by light that never stopped moving. Webb shows that the universe did not pass through clean, simple phases. There was no moment when chaos suddenly became order. Instead, structure and uncertainty coexisted from the very beginning. Stars formed while galaxies were still assembling. Dust appeared alongside light. Growth and collapse happened together. The universe learned how to be complex while it was still learning how to exist. This challenges the idea that beginnings must be fragile. The earliest galaxies Webb observes are not tentative sketches. They are bold, active systems, forming stars rapidly, interacting with their surroundings, reshaping themselves again and again. Time did not ease them gently into being. It pressed them forward with energy and motion. As these observations accumulate, the story told by Voyager and Hubble gains new context. Voyager showed how influence fades with distance. Hubble showed how vision fades with time. James Webb shows that even when light fades from sight, it does not disappear. It changes form. It waits to be received differently. This idea carries a quiet reassurance. Nothing important is truly lost. It may move beyond immediate reach. It may become faint, but it remains part of the larger structure, traveling, transforming, persisting. The universe does not erase its past. It carries it forward, encoded in light, motion, and memory. Webb's observations also remind us that knowledge is layered. What once seemed complete is revealed as partial. What once felt like an answer becomes a doorway to deeper questions. This is not failure. It is the natural rhythm of understanding. Each generation sees farther, not because the universe changes, but because perception deepens. There is a calm honesty in this process. NASA's instruments do not promise final explanations. They do not claim to reveal everything. They extend awareness just enough to show how much remains unseen. This balance between revelation and mystery keeps exploration gentle rather than overwhelming. As the story reaches this point, the idea of an edge becomes almost symbolic. An edge is no longer a boundary in space. It is a moment when familiar tools reach their limit and new ways of listening are required. Voyager reached a limit of control. Hubble reached a limit of sight. James Webb reaches a limit of interpretation, where observation moves faster than explanation. And still, the universe does not rush. Stars continue forming. Galaxies continue evolving. Light continues traveling. The processes Webb observes today will still be unfolding long after its mission ends. Time remains vast and patient. As you settle into rest, allow that patience to echo inward. There is no need to resolve every thought, no need to reach the end of every question. Some understanding arrives only when the mind is quiet enough to receive it. In this quiet, imagine the three paths continuing. Voyager, moving silently between stars, far beyond instruction. Hubble circling Earth, returning again and again to the same sky. James Webb holding still in the cold, listening for warmth from the first light. Together they form a single gesture, not a reach for dominance, but a reach for awareness. A reminder that exploration, at its deepest level, is not about pushing harder. It is about paying attention gently, over time, as the universe reveals itself not all at once, but piece by piece, in a rhythm that is calm enough to rest within. As this quiet exploration continues, a different understanding begins to settle in. The universe does not reveal itself through moments of triumph. It reveals itself through consistency, through systems that keep working long after attention fades, through signals that continue arriving, even when they are barely noticed. James Webb's observations remind us that beginnings are not distant memories sealed away from the present. They are active foundations. The light Webb receives from early galaxies is still shaping the universe today, stretched, softened, but never erased. In this sense, time does not separate events, it connects them. What existed long ago continues to influence what exists now. This continuity reshapes how edges are understood. An edge is not where something stops. It is where one form of understanding gives way to another. Voyager moved beyond the reach of the sun and taught us that influence fades gradually. Hubble pushed vision outward and taught us that darkness often hides abundance. James Webb reaches into the earliest light and teaches us that the past is not gone, only transformed. There is something quietly comforting in this realization. Nothing meaningful vanishes suddenly. It shifts, it stretches, it becomes subtle. The universe carries its history forward, layered rather than discarded. Each era leaves traces that can still be found, if the right kind of attention is applied. As NASA continues to listen, watch, and wait, the role of exploration itself feels softened. It is no longer driven by urgency or conquest. It is guided by patience, by the willingness to let instruments operate slowly, to let data arrive in its own time, to let understanding mature gradually. This approach mirrors the rhythm of the universe itself. Stars do not form quickly. Galaxies do not assemble overnight. Even change on a cosmic scale unfolds with a steadiness that resists haste. To observe such a universe requires a similar calm. In this way, the work of Voyager, Hubble, and James Webb becomes more than scientific. It becomes a quiet lesson in perspective, a reminder that progress does not always look like motion. Sometimes it looks like stillness held long enough for clarity to emerge. As you rest with this story, Imagine how far these instruments have extended human awareness without demanding anything in return. They do not require attention to continue. They do not depend on recognition. They simply operate, gather, and transmit, trusting that someone, somewhere will listen. The universe responds in kind. It does not rush to be understood. It does not simplify itself for convenience. It offers fragments, patterns, echoes. It allows meaning to emerge slowly, for those willing to remain present without forcing conclusions. In this shared patience, a deeper connection forms, not between humans and machines, but between curiosity and time, between the desire to know and the acceptance that knowing unfolds gradually. As the night continues, allow that acceptance to settle. There is nothing more to chase, nothing more to reach. The edges explored so far are not final. They are invitations. Voyager continues its silent drift, beyond guidance. Hubble continues its watch, faithful and steady. James Webb continues its listening, sensitive to the faintest warmth from the first light. And somewhere between those paths, awareness expands quietly, not outward in a rush, but inward in understanding. A recognition that the universe does not need to be conquered to be known. It only needs to be met with patience, curiosity, and enough stillness to notice what has always been there, waiting, calm and enduring, across distance, across time, and across the soft, quiet edges of perception itself. As this long view settles in, the idea of scale begins to soften rather than overwhelm. Billions of years no longer feel heavy. They feel spacious. Distance no longer feels isolating. It feels connective, a medium through which light, energy, and meaning quietly travel. The universe reveals that vastness is not a barrier to understanding, but the condition that makes understanding possible. James Webb's work continues to deepen this feeling. With every observation, it reminds us that the earliest moments of existence were not fragile sparks waiting to fade. They were active, expressive, already shaping patterns that still echo today. Stars ignited quickly. Galaxies assembled with confidence. Structure emerged not reluctantly, but naturally. This challenges a familiar human assumption that beginnings must be small, uncertain, and delicate. The universe suggests otherwise. It began with energy, motion, and complexity already in play. What followed was not a struggle to exist, but a refinement of form over time. When seen this way, the present moment becomes part of a much longer rhythm. Earth is not late to the story. It is not early. It exists precisely where it should, shaped by processes that have been unfolding patiently for eons. The same forces that formed the first stars still operate now, quieter in some places, more intense in others, but always present. This continuity invites a different kind of calm. If the universe can sustain structure across such immense spans of time, then urgency loses its grip. Moments do not need to be rushed to be meaningful. Change does not need to be forced to be real. Understanding does not need to be immediate to be true. In this context, the edges explored by Voyager, Hubble, and James Webb feel less like achievements and more like conversations. Voyager speaks about release, about letting something go beyond supervision. Hubble speaks about attention, about returning again and again to the same view until depth reveals itself. James Webb speaks about memory, about listening for what remains when brightness fades. Together they suggest that the universe responds differently, depending on how it is approached. When pushed, it resists. When observed patiently, it opens. This is not a scientific principle, but a pattern that emerges when time is allowed to do its work. As this understanding settles, the night itself feels less empty. Darkness becomes a space of possibility rather than absence, a place where light is resting rather than gone, where answers are forming rather than missing. Allow this perspective to drift inward. There is no need to solve the universe, No need to hold its scale all at once. It is enough to know that it is consistent, that it carries its past forward, that it does not abandon what it creates. In the quiet between thoughts, imagine the instruments continuing without concern for outcome. Voyager gliding steadily, untouched by expectation. Hubble returning its gaze to familiar darkness, finding new depth each time. James Webb holding still, waiting for ancient warmth to arrive. None of them hurry. None of them demand answers. They simply remain present, long enough for meaning to emerge. And perhaps that is the final invitation of this journey, to rest within scale rather than resist it, to allow curiosity without urgency, to trust that understanding grows not through effort alone, but through patience, continuity, and the willingness to remain still while something vast and quiet unfolds. As the night deepens, let that stillness settle fully. The universe does not require attention to continue existing. It allows awareness as a gift, not an obligation, and in accepting that gift gently, without grasping, the edges explored so far become places of rest rather than distance, calm rather than unknown, and presence rather than pursuit, carrying you softly onward into sleep, while the universe continues its slow, steady, unbroken motion, beyond thought, beyond time, and beyond the need to be reached at all. As this final stretch of the story unfolds, the universe feels less like something being explored and more like something being accompanied. James Webb continues its quiet listening, not interrupting the cosmos, not demanding answers, simply remaining present long enough for ancient light to arrive. In doing so, it changes the relationship between observer and observed. Universe is no longer a distant object of study. It becomes a process we are briefly aware of, unfolding regardless of attention, yet generous enough to leave traces that can be noticed. What Webb reveals most clearly is not just the age of the universe, but its continuity. The earliest galaxies it observes are not isolated beginnings. They are connected forward in time to everything that follows. The stars that formed then produced heavier elements. Those elements spread through space, becoming the raw material for new stars, new planets, and eventually worlds capable of reflection. Nothing is wasted, nothing is erased. Change is not replacement, but transformation. This understanding softens the idea of origin. The beginning of the universe is no longer a single moment, locked in the past. It is an influence that persists. The warmth Webb detects from ancient stars is not just historical evidence. It is part of an unbroken chain that leads directly to the present. In this way, the past is not behind us, it is beneath us, supporting everything that exists now. James Webb also shows that complexity does not require time to accumulate slowly. From very early on, the universe demonstrated an ability to organize itself. Gravity gathered matter. Dark matter shaped invisible frameworks. Gas cooled and condensed. Stars ignited. Galaxies interacted. This happened not hesitantly, but confidently, as if the universe understood its own rules from the start. For humanity, this realization carries a quiet emotional shift. It suggests that existence is not accidental in the fragile sense. It is conditional, yes, but resilient. Patterns form because the universe allows them to form. Structure emerges because the laws governing matter and energy favor it. Life, then, is not an interruption. It is a continuation. Seen through this lens, the instruments NASA has sent out would take on a different role. They are not conquering space. They are participating in a conversation that began long before them and will continue long after. Voyager participates through motion, carrying momentum into regions where intention no longer reaches. Hubble participates through attention, returning again and again to darkness until it reveals detail. James Webb participates through patience, waiting for light that has been traveling since the universe was young enough to remember itself. Together, they trace a gentle arc of awareness, outward, upward, backward in time, not to claim ownership, but to witness continuity. At this point, the idea of an edge feels almost unnecessary. There is no final boundary waiting to be reached. Every edge encountered so far has opened into something larger, quieter, and more subtle than expected. The edge of the solar system became interstellar space. The edge of vision became deeper structure. The edge of time became memory rather than absence. This reframes exploration itself. It is no longer about reaching a place where nothing exists beyond. It is about reaching a place where understanding must slow down, where familiar tools lose effectiveness and new ways of listening are required, where certainty gives way to context. As this realization settles, the universe feels less overwhelming. Its scale no longer demands comparison. Its age no longer diminishes the present. Instead, scale provides perspective, and age provides stability. The universe has endured far more than any single moment, and yet it remains coherent. In this coherence, there is rest. Nothing essential is rushed. Nothing meaningful is isolated. Everything participates in a larger pattern that unfolds without urgency. As you remain with this thought, allow it to quiet the mind. There is no need to hold the entire universe in awareness. It is enough to know that it continues, calmly, consistently, whether or not it is observed. That knowledge itself can be restful. Somewhere far beyond the planets, Voyager continues its silent drift, beyond instruction, beyond expectation. Above Earth, Hubble continues its patient watch, revisiting darkness and finding depth where emptiness was assumed. Far from Earth and Moon, James Webb remains still, listening for the faint warmth of the first light, arriving now, after billions of years of travel. None of them hurry. None of them conclude the story. They simply extend awareness gently, offering fragments of understanding without demanding interpretation. And perhaps that is where this journey rests for now. Not at an ending, but at a pause. A moment where curiosity no longer seeks direction, and attention no longer seeks resolution. The universe does not close its story. It leaves it open, steady, ongoing. As the night deepens, allow that openness to remain. There is nothing left to chase, nothing left to reach, only a vast continuity unfolding quietly, carrying stars, galaxies, instruments, and thoughts alike, through time, without train, without urgency, and without need for an edge at all. Just a calm and enduring presence, still moving, still listening, still becoming, long after attention softens and rest finally arrives. As this final stretch of the story unfolds, the universe feels less like something being explored and more like something being accompanied. James Webb continues its quiet listening, not interrupting the cosmos, not demanding answers, simply remaining present long enough for ancient light to arrive. In doing so, it changes the relationship between observer and observed. The universe is no longer a distant object of study. It becomes a process we are briefly aware of, unfolding regardless of attention, yet generous enough to leave traces that can be noticed. What Webb reveals most clearly is not just the age of the universe, but its continuity. The earliest galaxies it observes are not isolated beginnings. They are connected forward in time to everything that follows. The stars that formed then produced heavier elements. Those elements spread through space, becoming the raw material for new stars, new planets, and eventually worlds capable of reflection. Nothing is wasted, nothing is erased. Change is not replacement, but transformation. This understanding softens the idea of origin. The beginning of the universe is no longer a single moment locked in the past. It is an influence that persists. The warmth Webb detects from ancient stars is not just historical evidence. It is part of an unbroken chain that leads directly to the present. In this way, the past is not behind us, it is beneath us, supporting everything that exists now. James Webb also shows that complexity does not require time to accumulate slowly. From very early on, the universe demonstrated an ability to organize itself. Gravity gathered matter. Dark matter shaped invisible frameworks. Gas cooled and condensed. Stars ignited. Galaxies interacted. This happened not hesitantly, but confidently, as if the universe understood its own rules from the start. For humanity, this realization carries a quiet emotional shift. It suggests that existence is not accidental in the fragile sense. It is conditional, yes, but resilient. Patterns form because the universe allows them to form. Structure emerges because the laws governing matter and energy favor it. Life, then, is not an interruption. It is a continuation. Seen through this lens, the instruments NASA has sent outward take on a different role. They are not conquering space. They are participating in a conversation that began long before them and will continue long after. Voyager participates through motion, carrying momentum into regions where intention no longer reaches. Hubble participates through attention, returning again and again to darkness until it reveals detail. James Webb participates through patience, waiting for light that has been traveling since the universe was young enough to remember itself. Together they trace a gentle arc of awareness, outward, upward, backward in time, not to claim ownership, but to witness continuity. At this point, the idea of an edge feels almost unnecessary. There is no final boundary waiting to be reached. Every edge encountered so far has opened into something larger, quieter, and more subtle than expected. The edge of the solar system became interstellar space. The edge of vision became deeper structure. The edge of time became memory rather than absence. This reframes exploration itself. It is no longer about reaching a place where nothing exists beyond. It is about reaching a place where understanding must slow down, where familiar tools lose effectiveness and new ways of listening are required, where certainty gives way to context. As this realization settles, the universe feels less overwhelming. Its scale no longer demands comparison. Its age no longer diminishes the present. Instead, scale provides perspective, and age provides stability. The universe has endured far more than any single moment, and yet it remains coherent. In this coherence, there is rest. Nothing essential is rushed. Nothing meaningful is isolated. Everything participates in a larger pattern that unfolds without urgency. As you remain with this thought, allow it to quiet the mind. There is no need to hold the entire universe in awareness. It is enough to know that it continues, calmly, consistently, whether or not it is observed. That knowledge itself can be restful. Somewhere far beyond the planets, Voyager continues its silent drift, beyond instruction, beyond expectation. Above Earth, Hubble continues its patient watch, revisiting darkness and finding depth where emptiness was assumed. Far from Earth and Moon, James Webb remains still, listening for the faint warmth of the first light, arriving now, after billions of years of travel. None of them hurry, none of them conclude the story. They simply extend awareness gently, offering fragments of understanding without demanding interpretation. And perhaps that is where this journey rests for now, not at an ending, but at a pause. A moment where curiosity no longer seeks direction, and attention no longer seeks resolution. The universe does not close its story. It leaves it open, steady, ongoing. As the night deepens, allow that openness to remain. There is nothing left to chase, nothing left to reach. Only a vast continuity, unfolding quietly, carrying stars, galaxies, instruments, and thoughts alike through time, without strain, without urgency, and without need for an edge at all. Just a calm and enduring presence, still moving, still listening, still becoming, long after attention softens and rest finally arrives. As this final stretch of the story unfolds, the universe feels less like something being explored, and more like something being accompanied. James Webb continues its quiet listening, not interrupting the cosmos, not demanding answers, simply remaining present long enough for ancient light to arrive. In doing so, it changes the relationship between observer and observed. The universe is no longer a distant object of study. It becomes a process we are briefly aware of, unfolding regardless of attention, yet generous enough to leave traces that can be noticed. What Webb reveals most clearly is not just the age of the universe, but its continuity. The earliest galaxies it observes are not isolated beginnings. They are connected forward in time to everything that follows. The stars that formed then produced heavier elements. Those elements spread through space, becoming the raw material for new stars, new planets, and eventually worlds capable of reflection. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is erased. Change is not replacement, but transformation. This understanding softens the idea of origin. The beginning of the universe is no longer a single moment locked in the past. It is an influence that persists. The warmth Webb detects from ancient stars is not just historical evidence. It is part of an unbroken chain that leads directly to the present. In this way, the past is not behind us. It is beneath us, supporting everything that exists now. James Webb also shows that complexity does not require time to accumulate slowly. From very early on, the universe demonstrated an ability to organize itself. Gravity gathered matter, dark matter shaped invisible frameworks, gas cooled and condensed, stars ignited, galaxies interacted. This happened not hesitantly, but confidently, as if the universe understood its own rules from the start. For humanity, this realization carries a quiet emotional shift. It suggests that existence is not accidental in the fragile sense. It is conditional, yes, but resilient. Patterns form because the universe allows them to form. Structure emerges because the laws governing matter and energy favor it. Life, then, is not an interruption. It is a continuation. Seen through this lens, the instruments NASA has sent outward take on a different role. They are not conquering space. They are participating in a conversation that began long before them and will continue long after. Voyager participates through motion, carrying momentum into regions where intention no longer reaches. Hubble participates through attention, returning again and again to darkness until it reveals detail. James Webb participates through patience, waiting for light that has been traveling since the universe was young enough to remember itself. Together, they trace a gentle arc of awareness, outward, upward, backward, in time, not to claim ownership, but to witness continuity. At this point, the idea of an edge feels almost unnecessary. There is no final boundary waiting to be reached. Every edge encountered so far has opened into something larger, quieter, and more subtle than expected. The edge of the solar system became interstellar space. The edge of vision became deeper structure. The edge of time became memory rather than absence. This reframes exploration itself. It is no longer about reaching a place where nothing exists beyond. It is about reaching a place where understanding must slow down, where familiar tools lose effectiveness and new ways of listening are required, where certainty gives way to context. As this realization settles, the universe feels less overwhelming. Its scale no longer demands comparison. Its age no longer diminishes the present. Instead, scale provides perspective, and age provides stability. The universe has endured far more than any single moment, and yet it remains coherent. In this coherence, there is rest. Nothing essential is rushed. Nothing meaningful is isolated. Everything participates in a larger pattern that unfolds without urgency. As you remain with this thought, allow it to quiet the mind. There is no need to hold the entire universe in awareness. It is enough to know that it continues, calmly, consistently. Whether or not it is observed, that knowledge itself can be restful. Somewhere far beyond the planets, Voyager continues its silent drift, beyond instruction, beyond expectation. Above Earth, Hubble continues its patient watch, revisiting darkness and finding depth where emptiness was assumed. Far from Earth and Moon, James Webb remains still, listening for the faint warmth of the first light. Arriving now, after billions of years of travel. None of them hurry. None of them conclude the story. They simply extend awareness gently, offering fragments of understanding without demanding interpretation. And perhaps that is where this journey rests for now. Not at an ending, but at a pause. A moment where curiosity no longer seeks direction, and attention no longer seeks resolution. The universe does not close its story. It leaves it open, steady, ongoing. As the night deepens, allow that openness to remain. There is nothing left to chase, nothing left to reach. Only a vast continuity unfolding quietly, carrying stars, galaxies, instruments, and thoughts alike, through time without train, without urgency, and without need for an edge at all. Just a calm and enduring presence, still moving, still listening, still becoming. Long after attention softens and rest finally arrives. As this quiet awareness continues to expand, the universe begins to feel less like an external vastness, and more like a steady presence. Not something pressing in from afar, but something holding everything gently in place. James Webb's discoveries do not shout this truth. They reveal it slowly, through consistency rather than drama. What becomes clearer with time is that the universe is not built around moments of climax. It is built around continuation. Stars are born, not in bursts of celebration, but through long collapses of gas and dust. Galaxies grow, not through singular events, but through countless interactions unfolding across ages. Even light, which feels immediate to us, carries patience within it, traveling calmly for billions of years without urgency. This patience reshapes the idea of significance. Something does not need to be loud or sudden to matter. Something does not need to be close to be connected. The universe demonstrates again and again that meaning can travel quietly, arriving long after its origin, still intact. James Webb's view of early galaxies shows that order does not require stillness. It arises through movement, through interaction, through constant adjustment. The universe organizes itself not by resisting change, but by allowing change to flow within stable rules. This balance between flexibility and consistency is what allows complexity to endure. Seen this way, time itself feels less like something passing and more like something holding. It holds processes long enough for them to mature. It holds light long enough for it to be seen. It holds meaning long enough for understanding to form. Time is not erasing the universe. It is shaping it gently. As this realization settles, the fear of scale continues to soften. Immensity no longer feels threatening. It feels supportive. The universe is large, not to overwhelm, but to allow countless processes to unfold without interference. It gives space for stars to form, space for galaxies to evolve, space for awareness to arise, briefly, within the same system. This brings a quiet humility, but not a diminishing one. To be small within something vast is not to be insignificant. It is to be situated, to exist within a structure that allows existence at all. James Webb's observations show that the conditions for complexity are widespread. The universe is not sparse in its creativity. It is generous. As these thoughts drift, notice how the idea of exploration changes yet again. Exploration no longer feels like reaching outward. It feels like aligning inward, like adjusting perception until it matches the scale being observed. The universe does not require pursuit. It requires attunement. Voyager embodies this through motion that no longer depends on direction. Hubble embodies it through return, the act of looking again and again, without expectation of finality. James Webb embodies it through stillness, waiting without strain for ancient warmth to arrive. Each approach reveals something different, yet all point toward the same quiet truth. That understanding grows when attention is steady and unforced. That clarity often arrives not through effort, but through duration. As the night deepens, this truth can be felt rather than thought. There is no need to hold the universe in mind. It is enough to feel its steadiness, its consistency, its willingness to continue, whether or not it is observed. Somewhere, light released before Earth existed is still traveling, unbroken. Somewhere, galaxies are slowly reshaping themselves, indifferent to observation yet open to it. Somewhere, instruments continue their quiet work, extending awareness gently, without urgency. And here, now awareness rests briefly within that same unfolding, not as an observer standing apart, but as a moment within the flow. Connected by the same laws, carried by the same time, the universe does not ask to be understood completely. It allows understanding to grow gradually, at a pace that does not disturb rest. It invites attention, but never demands it. As this invitation settles, there is nothing left to add, no conclusion required, no edge to reach, only a vast continuity, moving calmly forward, holding stars, galaxies, machines and thoughts alike within its steady rhythm. Let that rhythm remain. Let the sense of scale soften further. The universe continues, unhurried and intact. And within that continuation, rest arrives naturally, without effort, without resolution, simply as another gentle expression of the same enduring flow that carries everything onward, quietly, patiently, and without end. As this sense of continuity settles even deeper, the universe begins to feel less like a backdrop and more like a rhythm, a steady motion that does not push or pull, but carries everything gently forward. James Webb's observations quietly reinforce this rhythm, not by revealing something shocking, but by showing how consistently the universe behaves across unimaginable spans of time. What becomes clear is that the universe does not hurry toward outcomes. It allows processes to unfold at the pace required by their nature. Stars take millions of years to form. Galaxies take billions of years to evolve. Light takes as long as it needs to arrive. Nothing is rushed, and nothing is delayed. Everything moves according to a timing that does not require supervision. This realization softens the idea of waiting. Waiting is no longer absence or delay. It becomes participation. Light waits as it travels. Space waits as it expands. Matter waits as it gathers and transforms. James Webb waits as it listens, aligned with this same patience. Through this lens, the early universe does not feel distant or inaccessible. It feels present in a quieter way. The warmth Webb detects from ancient stars is not a relic. It is a continuation. Energy released long ago still moves, still carries meaning, still arrives. The universe does not discard what it creates. It carries it forward, transformed, but intact. This continuity invites a deep calm. There is no need to rush understanding, because understanding is not running away. It arrives when conditions allow. It emerges when attention is steady enough to receive it. The universe does not hide its truths. It reveals them at scales that require patience. As this calm deepens, even the idea of discovery changes. Discovery no longer feels like uncovering something hidden. It feels like noticing something that has always been there. The early galaxies Webb observes were never waiting to be found. They were simply waiting to be seen. This reframing carries a quiet humility. Humans do not bring meaning to the universe. They encounter it. They tune into patterns that exist regardless of awareness. NASA's instruments do not create significance. They align perception with what is already unfolding. Voyager aligns through distance, showing how influence fades gently rather than ending abruptly. Hubble aligns through vision, showing how darkness often holds structure. James Webb aligns through sensitivity, showing how faint warmth can carry the story of beginnings. Each alignment reveals a different layer of the same universe, consistent across scale and time. In this consistency, there is reassurance. The universe is not chaotic at its core. It is dynamic, yes. Complex, yes. But it is governed by relationships that hold. Gravity continues to gather. Light continues to travel. Time continues to carry moments forward. As awareness rests within this understanding, the mind no longer needs to grasp. It can simply remain present. The universe does not require explanation to be real. It does not require attention to continue. It unfolds steadily, whether observed or not. Somewhere far beyond the planets, Voyager continues its silent motion, unaffected by expectation. Somewhere above Earth, Hubble continues its patient orbit, returning to the same darkness with renewed clarity. Somewhere far from both, James Webb remains still, listening for signals that have traveled since the universe was young. None of them rush, none of them seek closure. They exist within the same rhythm they observe. As this rhythm becomes felt rather than thought, rest deepens naturally. There is no pressure to resolve the story. The universe does not end, it continues. And in that continuation, there is room for quiet, for stillness, for release. Allow this sense of ongoing motion to carry awareness gently. Nothing important is being missed. Nothing essential is slipping away. The universe holds its own continuity. Understanding will arrive when it does, without force. As the night stretches on, let that assurance remain. The cosmos is not moving toward an edge. It is expanding into itself, endlessly, calmly, without urgency. And within that expansion, awareness can rest easily, knowing that everything meaningful continues, whether it is held in mind or allowed to drift, just as light continues its journey, unbroken and patient, across distance, across time, and across the soft, quiet openness that holds all things steadily and without end. As this gentle motion continues, the universe feels less like something unfolding ahead and more like something breathing all around. Not expanding with force, but opening with ease. James Webb's ongoing observations reinforce this feeling, revealing a cosmos that is not rushing toward outcomes, but settling into patterns that sustain themselves naturally over time. There is a quiet trust embedded in this process. Stars form without instruction. Galaxies assemble without planning. Light travels without guidance. Everything moves according to relationships that hold without supervision. The universe does not require correction, it requires time. This understanding changes the way beginnings are felt. The earliest light Webb detects does not feel fragile or incomplete. It feels confident, as if the universe understood its direction from the very start. Not a destination, but a way of continuing, a way of allowing complexity to arise and persist. In this light, the present moment becomes less isolated. It is no longer a brief point between past and future. It is a continuation of everything that has come before. The atoms that make up awareness were forged in ancient stars. The light now reaching Webb began its journey long before Earth existed. Nothing is disconnected. This continuity softens the sense of urgency that often accompanies curiosity. There is no need to hurry toward answers. The universe is not withholding them, it is offering them at a pace aligned with its own scale. James Webb listens without strain. It waits because waiting is how reception happens. As this becomes clearer, the role of patience gains new meaning. Patience is not passive. It is an active alignment with time. It is the choice to remain present long enough for subtle signals to arrive. In this way, patience becomes a form of participation. Voyager participates by continuing without feedback. Hubble participates by returning again and again to the same sky. James Webb participates by holding still, receptive to faint warmth carried across billions of years. Each shows a different way of being present within vastness. Together they suggest that exploration does not require intrusion. It requires sensitivity, an ability to adjust perception until it matches the scale of what is being observed. The universe responds not to force, but to attunement. As this understanding settles, the idea of an edge feels increasingly irrelevant. There is no final boundary waiting to be reached, only deeper layers of coherence waiting to be noticed. Each layer reveals another beneath it, not emptiness, but structure. In this sense, mystery becomes less threatening. It is no longer something that blocks understanding. It is something that preserves depth. The universe remains interesting because it is not exhausted by explanation. As awareness rests within this calm, thoughts no longer need to organize themselves. They can drift gently, like light moving through space, unforced and uninterrupted. There is no demand to conclude the story. The universe does not conclude, it continues. Somewhere beyond the reach of influence, Voyager glides steadily, unconcerned with outcome. Somewhere above Earth, Hubble continues its patient watch, finding new meaning in familiar darkness. Somewhere far from both, James Webb listens quietly, receiving signals that began their journey when the universe itself was young. Each continues without urgency. Each exists within the same unfolding. As this awareness deepens, rest arrives naturally. There is nothing left to reach for, nothing left to solve. The universe does not require resolution to be complete. It moves forward gently, carrying stars, galaxies, instruments, and moments of awareness alike within its steady rhythm. And within that rhythm, everything finds its place, without effort, including rest itself, settling softly as another expression of the same quiet continuity that holds all things, unbroken, patient, and endlessly ongoing. As James Webb continues its quiet work, something remarkable becomes clear. The universe does not resist being known. It simply requires a different kind of presence. Not urgency, not force, but steadiness. Webb does not search the sky in haste. It waits. It holds position. It allows light to arrive in its own time. This alone changes the nature of discovery. Instead of chasing moments, Webb receives them. Instead of pursuing answers, it allows questions to deepen. What Webb shows most gently is that the earliest universe was not waiting for observation. It was already complete in its own motion. Galaxies were forming, stars were igniting, matter was organizing itself into patterns that still echo today. The universe did not pause until it was seen. It continued regardless. This realization carries a subtle comfort. Meaning does not depend on attention. Processes unfold whether or not they are witnessed. James Webb does not give importance to the universe. It reveals that importance was always there. As images accumulate, the early universe begins to feel familiar rather than alien. The same gravitational rules apply. The same balances between collapse and expansion appear. Even at the beginning, the universe behaved like itself. Different in scale, yes. Different in intensity, yes. But consistent in character. This consistency dissolves the idea that we are peering into something fragile or incomplete. The early universe was not uncertain. It was active, expressive, and confident in its unfolding. Time did not weaken it. Time carried it forward. Webb's observations also reveal something quieter. That complexity is not rare. It emerges wherever conditions allow. Galaxies form clusters, stars form systems, planets form environments. Patterns repeat, not identically, but reliably. In this repetition, the universe feels less accidental, not predetermined, but coherent, not scripted, but structured. There is room for variation, but also for stability. Enough order for continuity, enough openness for change. As this understanding settles, the idea of an edge fades almost entirely. There is no place where the universe stops and something else begins. Only places where perception must adjust, where instruments must change, where listening must become more sensitive. James Webb marks one of those moments. Not an ending, but a refinement. A shift from seeing to sensing, from brightness to warmth, from immediacy to memory. And in that shift, something important happens. Exploration becomes quieter. Less about arrival, more about presence. Less about control, more about trust in process. As you rest with this thought, Imagine Webb holding still in the cold. Its mirrors open, its instruments calm, ancient light arriving without announcement. No urgency, no climax, just continuity. The universe does not need to be reached. It is already here, already unfolding, already complete in its movement. And with that realization, the story does not end. It softens, it slows, it prepares to rest. In this final quiet, all three paths come together, not as conclusions, but as harmonies. Voyager continues outward, beyond guidance, beyond correction, a gesture of release, something sent without expectation of return. Motion continuing simply because it was set in motion long ago. Hubble continues its watch near Earth, returning to the same darkness again and again, finding depth where emptiness was assumed, teaching patience through repetition. James Webb continues listening, not moving far, not changing direction, simply holding still long enough for the faintest signals to arrive. Together, they form a single arc, outward, upward, backward in time, not to conquer space, not to define limits, but to expand awareness gently. What NASA reached at the edge was not a boundary. It was a realization that the universe does not end. It continues beyond control, beyond sight, beyond immediate understanding. The edge is where certainty softens, where answers give way to context, where curiosity no longer demands resolution. In this space, there is rest, no pressure to explain everything, no urgency to arrive anywhere. The universe unfolds whether or not it is watched. Understanding grows whether or not it is rushed. As the night deepens, allow this continuity to remain. There is nothing left to follow, nothing left to prove. Only a vast motion carrying stars, galaxies, machines, and thoughts alike through time. Light continues traveling, space continues expanding, time continues holding moments gently, and somewhere within that steady flow, awareness can let go, not disappearing, just resting. The universe does not close its story. It leaves it open, calm, unbroken, still becoming. And in that becoming, sleep arrives naturally, not as an ending, but as another quiet transition, another gentle edge, one that does not need to be crossed, only noticed, as everything continues, softly and endlessly, just as it always has.